Good day, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending from where you're joining in from. You are welcome to today's webinar on platforms as a pathway to digital livelihoods for refugees. And this is supported by the Hilton Foundation and organized by JobTech Alliance and BFA Global. Before we start, please let us know where you're joining in from. So please let us know in the chat box your name, your organization, and of course, the country you're joining in from. To get us started, I will hand over to Michelle Hassan, who is the country director of BFA Global and who will be moderating today's section. Michelle, over to you.
Thanks, Kenneth, and thank you everyone for joining. We'll share my screen. It'll be about 20 minutes of presentation, 25 minutes of presentation. I'll try to keep it short. And then we have a great panelist that's coming up to discuss some of the findings we got from our research, as well as potential work that actually they're doing in the refugee space. So let me see, are you able, guys, to see my screen? Okay, thanks. So the next 25 minutes, we'll just go through what our findings are from the research we conducted in Kampala, but we kind of like just start a little bit about what the background is, why did we actually do as a JobTech Alliance, thinking about JobTech and refugees, looking at the Ugandan landscapes, and then dig deeper into the research to talk about kind of like platform findings and what the refugees are saying, and then looking at what are some of the opportunities and recommendations we actually going to share. So a bit of background for people who are new, what is JobTech Alliance? We are an ecosystem building initiative, and our work is to think about inclusive job tech in Africa. We are always interested in looking at digital platforms that actually connect people to whatever work opportunities that enable them to build their livelihoods. Currently, we're working in 10 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa and have two work mainstream. One in terms of creating enabling environment for entrepreneurs, and then another one in terms of creating a range of activities in terms of acceleration. But specifically for Uganda, we are looking at forcibly displaced people and the refugees. And this is due to the support of the Hilton Foundation, especially for the Uganda work. But overall, as a JobTech Alliance, we have two partners who are actually part of that, which is BFA Global and then Mexico as well. I guess the first question always people ask every time we talk about JobTech is, what is JobTech? So we spent the last year kind of creating the categories of the taxonomy, what we see as JobTech platforms. And we see kind of like 5 key categories of the platforms. One is platforms for online work. And this is where the work is mediated online and saying like negotiated and everything, but the work itself is offline. So when you think about getting your ride-hailing app, if you think about getting an Uber, you get it through your app, but actually the physical thing is being done offline. Then we also have another category called platforms for digitally delivered work. And that is more so in terms of looking at platforms that the work itself is online, it's mediated online and the work itself is online. So when you think about globally, company like Upwork is an example of you can be an online freelancers to be able actually to do anything, but there are some companies like do micro work and also some things like X to earn. We have another category called digital services for micro enterprises. And these are platforms that offer businesses and especially micro enterprises tools that enable them to increase efficiency and actually to increase sales. So when you think about e-commerce platforms as a marketplace or things like a business management or growth tools or like a logistics platform, an example is like our Sopo as part of it. Like that's an example, a great example in that sector. There's also a sector we call it tech-enabled skilling. And this is where we're saying we're generating skill sets to help you with work. So not to be confused with EdTech, but tech-enabled skilling is very specific on creating jobs to be able to actually analyze that. So in terms of like technical and professional skilling, or kind of like testing and credential. So in the global market, maybe Coursera can be one example. And then we have this last category called digital tools for worker enablement. And these are platforms necessarily not only on their own, but sometimes able to plug into other platforms where they're able to think about workers' rights as part of their core. And it can be like kind of professional identity, where you can move your insights from one or data from one company to another, and also like things like enabling you with like insurance and social benefits as part of it. So kind of like those are like the bigger taxonomy. If you go to our website, you actually see more in terms of like subcategories you've highlighted in all this. So again, why refugee and platform? Why were we interested in this? So mainly because one, refugee and especially the Ugandan population, we are seeing younger people facing more barriers to employment than older individuals. And what for us, as we kind of did the research, we realized unemployment rate for refugee and especially young refugees was quite high. In Uganda, it was 3 times as high as young Ugandans, showing that there's a need to think about innovative ways of kind of creating, demolishing the barriers, but also giving them opportunities of getting more income. But also every time we look at the data, it was like consistently refugees, labor market outcome for refugees were consistently worse than host community. And that's not only in Uganda, but global when you look at it. But also when you see that by missing that decent employment for refugees, then there's a missed opportunity for refugees to actually support their countries, their host countries that they're in, but also increases kind of like the risk for poverty, but also the dependence on humanitarian assistance, kind of just enabling that. But what we see as an opportunity is like, as we kind of reading, and we're saying like, why can job tech platforms actually offer new forms of digital employment? And we think that there's something there, and that's why we ended up saying like, let's go to the field, let's go learn about it, and especially see how job tech platforms can be able to actually offer these opportunities to refugees. So a little bit about background and about refugees in Uganda. Uganda is one of the largest refugee hosting country in the world, in Africa. It hosts about 1.5 million refugees, and most of the people come from South Sudan and DRC Congo, and a little bit from Burundi, Somalia, Rwanda, and Eritrea. Our focus was in Kampala, and just because Kampala is hosting about 123,000 refugees as well, but also given that Kampala is the capital city and urban refugees, we thought like there were more opportunities there and more platforms were in Kampala. So we're like, let's see if we're able to go that. One thing to highlight why we liked Uganda is Uganda has a great open door policy to displaced people. They are giving them access to land, they're giving them access to freedom, they're able to transverse anywhere in the country, and also giving the right to employment, health, and education. So it felt like the right policy for us to dig deeper into looking at the opportunities for platforms. A little bit about the employment statistics among refugees. So when we look at the data, and this is from UNHCR data set, 29% of refugees in Uganda are already actively working, but it's 35% less likely than Ugandan's national to be employed. So it showed that there was still a gap there. But also when we looked at the high-level skills of refugees, we found that 32% of them are actually earning less than their host community with a similar skill set level. That also, I think, is one of the key barriers. And again, looking at it is when dug deeper, it was 1.75 times more likely than a host community member for a refugee to fall below poverty line. And this kind of like showcases like why we actually need to work in the sector. When we looked at the self-employment, we saw that 29% of those working refugees are actually in the self-employment sector. And this means that they are working their own businesses, like tailoring or having their own shops, but we able actually to do their own businesses. But also like 80% of the young people were in self-employment, kind of showcasing like there is a whole opportunity there. And when we looked at the subsect for Kampala, it showcased that 25% of refugees in Kampala are in some form of a self-employment or are self-employed. And this is one of the reasons why we actually fell into self-employment, was because they were finding it difficult to get into formal jobs. So it was an easier entry to getting new work or actually livelihoods. They end up setting up their own businesses. So what's kind of the global subset? So when we went and scanned all the companies that are in Uganda and the job tech platforms, you can see like there are pretty many platforms, over 30 platforms in Uganda, and some will still keep getting updates. So if you actually know of any that is not on this list, please reach out to us, because you actually want to make sure this list keeps updated. And you can see it really looks crowded. However, there's still some challenges. In Africa, when you look at this graph, which was done by Sunfree, Uganda still falls under the lower end, with South Africa being in the higher end and Nigeria and Kenya. And this high showcases that even though Uganda is growing, there's still some need of it still being nascent, and there's need for it to actually grow higher. And this may be due to a couple of things. So when we look at what are the building blocks for job tech platforms, we see these are kind of the six key things that we see that helps countries or actually platforms grow, especially if the sector actually has all this. One is mobile internet. For you to be able to actually have platform, we actually need to have internet to be able to go through it. In Uganda, 40% of the population has access to mobile money internet. So that showcased that at least in that case, Uganda is actually prime for it. In terms of smartphone penetration, Uganda shows 30% of the population has smartphone. And this is not just saying refugees, but it's just global in terms of all of the country, showcasing that. In terms of digital payments, Uganda, according to the data, 66% of people actually have access to mobile money. And mobile money is the biggest thing, and then maybe banks can kind of become later. But showing casing that, yes, there's still room to grow, but we actually, as a country, Uganda has digital payments. In terms of digital talent and digital skills, it's still a growing area. So there is kind of like a low literacy in Uganda, even though people have reached secondary school education and growing well, but still literacy level is still wanting. So there is still some skill sets and need to upgrade in terms of digital skills. In terms of venture capital funding, Uganda is still nascent. It's not as big as the 4 markets we've seen, especially in the big data, talking about Kenya, Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa, but it's growing slowly, but a bit. But where Uganda comes out strong, it's actually a really young population. The median age of a Ugandan is about 17, 18 years old, showing that they are ripe to actually becoming be able to actually have the right people to join job tech platforms. So what are some of the insights? So what we found out from the platform side is, and this is not just only for Uganda, but I think across Africa, there is a really big gap between ambition and reality. And we'll dig deeper into what does that actually mean in the next couple of slides. And this talks about like where the ambition is for the job tech platform is really great, but what's the ability for them to actually absorb or place large number of either unemployed or unemployed youth, and that can include refugees. There are still a lot more opportunities there. We think for us to be able to bridge that gap, it needs to be a concerted effort from not just only one side, but there are various groups of stakeholders that are able to enable us to actually to reduce that gap. So what are some of the challenges we've seen in the Uganda platforms? So most of the platforms we talk to actually are facing barriers to reaching growth stage. And these include things like they're not able to get platforms or limited capital to invest in their businesses. And that's definitely then limits them in terms of recruiting new people or actually training for the people to be able to perform in their platforms. We saw from Uganda, from our research, that there are few incubators in the ecosystem that actually help to support that journey. So an incubator like Innovation Village, it's really key in the whole ecosystem because they're supporting that, like early stage companies to actually produce product market fit. But we need more of that, right? We need more of incubators in the whole ecosystem to actually enable and generate more companies to come in. But even though digital payments also is 66%, a lot of informal transactions is still cash-based. Therefore, then it becomes a challenge in terms of that data trails for the workers on the platforms. So that becomes, again, difficult for platforms to, in terms of layering either financial products or services that actually could lead the growth of platforms. So it becomes a quagmire because of like, how do you actually deal with that? And then in that case, because of lack of investment, platforms are then unable to make big investments, especially in things like worker training, to actually make that whole pool in terms of deployment trading. But what we're saying, like even once they onboard, and this is just general, not just refugee, worker churn is a key challenge for most platforms. When we talked about 40, we talked about 40 on those platforms. Most of them said, yeah, one of the key barriers is worker churn. And a key contributor is the inconsistency in income. And this can be either due to uncertainty or the volatile demand of the platform. For example, the Jumia JForce channel has about 20,000 agents, but in any given month, only like 5% of that base is active, showcasing that there's still a lot more people not being able to be part of that platform or actually continue working. Also, what we saw is most of the platform, as mentioned, I think it's given, like a lot of them are in two major cities, Kampala and Entebbe, and mostly the surrounding areas. But the labor demand actually significantly drops when they go outside of these major cities. So therefore, then it creates an excess in terms of labor supply in areas that are actually not within the city. But also what we've seen is with blue collar workers, especially in those platforms, the setup does not actually allow for end of initial working capital for more raw materials or inputs. So for example, if I'm a plumber, I need my wrench or I need another tool, I need to figure out how to get it so that I'm able to actually participate in a job tech platforms. So that becomes challenging for workers to be able to actually get on the platform and work. So they end up just signing and then getting off again. But that's just only on one side, but also the demand side also has limited skill. So if Ugandans are not able to use e-commerce platforms or be able to actually to order more online, then it doesn't mean then it becomes a challenge, because if there's a lower middle income or middle class people who are, or people actually have disposable income who are actually going to use these platforms, it becomes challenging if there's no demand. So a platform might be fantastic in terms of their UI, UX, their user journey is interesting, but if there are not people using it, then that becomes challenge. So job tech platforms always kind of like help create new work, but we actually need to start thinking about how do we encourage more people to use the platform so that more people actually get jobs. But on the good news is that when we looked at the platforms in Uganda, actually are offering lower barrier to entry for refugees. Two kind of key things I actually want to highlight. One is platforms are like, they don't require high entry points. You only just need to require like a working phone number and an email address, or in some cases for a business, just a business location. And that's it. But also the other thing that also for us was interesting, because it's kind of like a low barrier, is most platforms are offering different payouts. So for example, like Safe Border said, they can pay their workers either in cash or through mobile money or through bank transfer, depending on what their needs are. So like for a refugee, if they don't have a bank account, then they're able to get their money through cash or through like even mobile money itself, without even thinking about a bank account. And that choice actually is great for refugees. So one of the key things we talked to the platforms was, do you actually have refugees as part of your platform? 4 of the platforms we talked to confirm they do have refugees as part of their workforce, though it was not deliberate. Most of the platforms actually mentioned they think that they actually have refugees, but they have not done analysis of that. But none of them were actively recruiting for refugees because they have not thought about them as a viable market, or they just thought like, okay, maybe they are, maybe they're not there, we don't know. So it's only when we actually started these conversations with them, they started realizing, maybe actually we should start thinking of them as a viable, or being intentional about targeting them as a segment. So that was kind of like on the platform side. So we looked at the refugees and asked them again, the same questions, like, do you know job tech platforms? Who do you actually interact with? I should actually put a poll here and said, like, what do you think are the platforms that most interesting platforms that refugees are using? So these are the platforms. 4 key platforms, and you can see all of them are either e-commerce or ride-hailing app. These are the only platforms that refugees know about in Uganda. Most common was Safe Border. We actually even got a few who actually are drivers on Safe Border. Uber, a couple of people have heard about it. Jumia and Gigi. Gigi's like, can people actually sell your product online? So it's an e-commerce platform. Safe Border and Uber are ride-hailing apps. So it shows that there is still quite a low awareness of platforms even among the refugee population. So what does that mean? It means that even like as refugees, they have no idea of that there's an opportunity of alternative avenues for them obtaining jobs. For the ones who actually said they got, it was very few of them who said, oh, I had from a neighbor or I had from a friend in my social network. So that becomes challenging. But also, like, they're not aware that I can actually grow my small businesses. We have seen the statistics of platform refugees who are self-employed. So this kind of shows like if they had goods to sell, they're limiting themselves by just being offline. Whereas when they can join an e-commerce platform like Jumia, they're able actually to, or Kitoku, they're able to sell more online, but they actually don't know about them. But so in looking at overall, like what are kind of the key barriers for jobs opportunities for refugees? So the first one is kind of like information gap, where what we kept on hearing is like most information for refugees they're getting is through social networks. So if your social network is not strong enough, then you're likely to lose a really important information, including like who's recruiting, what's the right skill sets to have right now, how much will I actually be charging, and all those things. And that becomes a challenge, because then how do you actually grow from outside your small community? When we talked to them, they said most of them did not actually know there are job tech platforms that are they're like offering jobs opportunities, but also like recruitment. In some cases, they've been helpful in terms of like if they're in a WhatsApp group, then they can hear some of the notes that they actually have there. The other challenge we kept on hearing was a lot of like labor supply demand mismatch, right? Most vocational trainings being offered, especially in the country right now, are not informed by market demand. When we talked to, and what we're seeing in the terms of like the TVET schools, a lot of them were in like, vocational training. So brick making, salon, cosmetic. But not thinking about like, what are the demands in the international, even international market that can help like in thinking about like not just being recognized small, but actually global. The other challenge also we kind of hearing in terms of like labor supply and demand mismatch is kind of like lack of recognition of foreign qualification. If I'm a doctor in South Sudan and I've come now to Uganda, how do I verify my skill set that I'm actually a doctor and be able actually to get a job as a doctor? That's a key challenge because we can't see, we need to actually have a place where somebody either validates some documentation or you're actually able to start building your own portfolio. But if someone asks you for your college certificate, it's very hard for you to have said, oh, I actually ran away with my college certificate. In most cases, people just run away because they want to save their lives. So that becomes a challenge because they actually don't have papers for it. In terms of access to finance, and I look at access to finance in terms of like cost of entry or like barriers of entry, like access to finance is a key thing. Currently, for a refugee to start a business, it's either getting a grant either through a family and friend or through the refugee-led organizations that you actually need to have known about through your family and friends so that you're actually able to get some funding to start your jobs. And in most cases, then DC excludes a ton of people because they don't actually have opportunity. And more so if you actually don't have a strong network again. There are also costs that are like incurring, like there's a cost of upskilling or even like certification so that people can verify. And if as a refugee, I don't actually have the money to be able to offer that, then it becomes a big barrier. So they end up being dependent on trainings, either being led by or offered by a refugee-led organization or through scholarships from some of the nonprofits. And we kept on hearing that through the research. But then that discourages because they're not like, it's only going to be a limited number of people then that gets this training. Is there a potential opportunity to actually upskill? So it's not all gloom. There are now, we can actually talk about how JobTech actually responds to all these needs. If you look at information gap, if we're able to showcase platforms like Fuzu and Flip Africa, it highlights the job opportunities that are available in the market. If refugees are able to know about them, they're able to actually to see it. Onboarding is easy. You just sign up with your phone number. You're able to actually have an email address. You're able to get in. And we've seen in some cases, they're also kind of like offering job readiness. So for example, Fuzu offers like a premium service for career coaching on like which course actually benefits you or which job is actually right for you, which is really going to be beneficial for young people who want to join the workforce. So this is like a platform that we are able to actually work and use among the refugees. Then we have kind of like labor supply mismatch. We have platforms that actually offer refugees to overcome barriers related to kind of like to school to work transition. So it can be platforms like Credly, which is an international platforms that offer digital credentials and verifying skills that actually could be used to access jobs. So instead of wanting to have a college certificate through this platform, we can be able to start creating our portfolio and people actually start knowing you and your skill set and be able to actually work internationally. In terms of access to finance, we're seeing interesting platforms like Tendo in West Africa, saying things like, you don't actually need to have a stock to be able to actually start selling. They are offering a platform for resellers to sell products from wholesalers without having the need to actually have the initial capital investment. And also like platforms like Wasoko, seeing them offering a credit facility that one is able to buy goods on credit for a few days, sell it, and then be able actually to repay back. In terms of costs, as mentioned, we've seen a lot of platforms, especially in the tech-enabled skilling sector, that are able to offer opportunity to upskill. And these courses are usually free or actually embedded as part of the platform itself. Because I have a few minutes, so I'll kind of rush through the next 2-3 slides. We're also seeing like IDs is no longer a barrier to the tech penetration among refugees. In Kampala, especially, you can see from the statistics from this slide, a lot of people still have access to a smartphone, they have access to mobile money, and actually to a phone. And this is based on the regulation that was done a couple, like 2-3 years back, that actually helped refugees to register SIM cards under their own names. But there's still a gap, right? There's still a gap in terms of accreditation and sometimes like soft skills training. And we're seeing this as an opportunity of either where the platforms can actually help, even though like refugees have basic numeracy and literacy skills, they still need help in terms of digital literacy. So how do we upskill that? And that can be done either through refugee-led organization or through grants from donor and development community, but also through other platforms generated to be able to actually encourage. But so does JobTech actually offer? We see, yes, JobTech actually offers an opportunity for a refugee to have a portfolio of work, not just only depending on one. From a previous research that BFE has done, we saw that refugees had on median 3 income sources, and JobTech can actually be an additional one. So for example, having a ChapChap platform, which offers you an ability to sell airtime or even selling electricity tokens, you can do that as you're still a shopkeeper. So that actually enables you to work while you're still at your shop. Or for example, Razi, that offers you to actually, you can be in school and actually do a gig in the evening where you're able to collect data on behalf of the company. So offering those opportunities while you're able to do that. But even as we all do all this, I think we need to be cognizant that data privacy is still a key concern for the refugee community, given of their situation. So that discourages them. So even as JobTech platforms are thinking about encouraging refugee, they need to encourage and actually make the refugees aware about the data privacy that they have to be able to ensure that. And you can see at the end where we are talking about one quote, said, one refugee actually said, I would really love to, but I'm actually feared that my credentials will fall under the wrong hands. So having that assurances will help us. So which JobTech platform actually makes sense for refugees? In Uganda, we don't think gig matching and JobTech platforms are offering at scale right now. So maybe then it actually will not offer scale for potential for refugees. However, given from the data we've seen, there's a lot of refugees who own and run their businesses. We think the subset of digital service platforms are actually offering digital services for micro enterprises that offers the biggest opportunities for the refugee population. So kind of like highlights in terms of what the support can they need or in terms of recommendation. One, yeah, we need to actually support JobTech platform growth. So as the JobTech Alliance, we're trying to do that through having this platform and kind of doing such research to highlight and showcase what the JobTech platforms in countries are doing. So if you're a JobTech platform here, please register and become a part of a member. But we're able actually to amplify and say, these are the things we're doing as well. But also I think as we're continuing, JobTech platforms will need to have de-risk capital, and it can either be in form of grants or concessional financing so that they can be able to test out all these new things. Critical, we need to grow the awareness of JobTech platforms. It can either be above the line marketing, below the line marketing, talking to as many people as possible, talking to refugee-led organization, so that refugees understand that there's this opportunity or how they can earn more income through different methods. But also like upskilling, right? We still need to do that. So it can either be, again, partnership with RLOs, but also platforms can integrate their own learning or partner with other actually actors with either a chatbot or an API. And I know now AI is a big thing currently, so maybe there's something new that can actually come up that can be plugged into a platform and kind of improve their learning journeys, but to just continuing upskilling them. But there's also an opportunity for like development partners to offer skills building or philanthropic funding to organizations that are able to upskill, and so that the refugees are ready not only to get opportunities in country, but also globally as well. But let's not forget about access to capital for users, right? Because even as we sort out all the other side, refugees will still need the right tools to actually participate. And this can be done through models. So either thinking about productive asset financing, and that can be offered through banks, microfinance, or fintechs, or even just having a working capital loan or a business loan as well. So that kind of creates like some of the job opportunities as well. Yeah, so I guess that's the end of my presentation. So thank you so much. I will look at the questions, or can, yeah, the kind of number. Yeah, and then maybe, yeah, Marike, maybe you can continue.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. That was really interesting and a very thorough overview of the report, which is great to see this coming out and have this fresh take and a lot of additional information about job tech platforms in Uganda and the relationship with refugees. So very excited to see this coming out today. I'll now kind of facilitate and moderate the next session of the call, which is a short discussion about the report that Michelle just presented. And I won't be alone. I'll be joined by Shakib Nsubuga. I'm very sorry if I hope I pronounce the names correctly, from Jumia, and Cedric Murhula from Yarid, the Young African Refugees for Integral Development. So I'll start by introducing myself. And before I do that, I just wanted to check if anyone from the Hilton Foundation is on the call. If you do, please feel free to, after the panel, maybe just give us a few thoughts or say a few words. So yes, my name is Marijke Deleu. I'm very sorry, it's a very difficult name. People call me Malaika, feel free to do so. I work for ULearn Uganda at the Learning Hub. ULearn is a common good that is dedicated to the refugee response in Uganda. And so we do three things really. We also are a consortium of 3 partners. We do research where we generate new evidence, and we currently are working on a research on livelihoods, enablers and barriers in the refugee response, which will also be looking at some of the secondary cities. One of the first pieces of research that is generating data from that particular geographic location. And then we do learning. This is the part that I work on. What does that mean? It means that we're trying to identify good practices, interesting new things like job tech, that we kind of work with evidence that's already available. Some of our thinking is there's a lot of evidence generation, so can we use it better? Can we facilitate dissemination and uptake for what's already there? And then convene people, obviously. That's also something we do. And then thirdly, there's accountability to affected populations or refugee participation, where we support refugee voice and choice integration in coordination program and programming in the refugee response. So today I'll be moderating. We'll be talking to people who have a lot to say around this topic. I just want to flag that I'm not a technical expert myself, so I'm really here as a convener. So in case I make any errors, so please bear with me. So then maybe now we can hear from Shakib Nsubuga from Jumia. Shakib, if you could just introduce yourself and Jumia and why you're on this call, on this panel.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for everyone for making the time to come and be a part of this webinar. My name is Shakib Nsubuga, and I'm the head of offline sales in Jumia, Uganda. I'm also the head of expansion in Jumia, Uganda. Jumia is a #1 online platform for buying a number of different things. We have over 5 million items available. My role in Jumia in expansion is looking at Jumia business outside of Kampala, so outside of the capital cities, and trying to grow this business in the different cities and towns across the country. My role of offline sales is looking at how we can get more people that do not have access to smartphones or internet to actually be able to have offline sales, to be able to use basically to use our platform. So we're on the fringes of innovation, if you like. We are the spaces where we're trying to match user needs and the user experience as well. So we have a group of people that we call JForce. JForce is a sales team consisting of over 20,000 agents across the country. They utilize their smartphones to basically make orders for people that do not have access to the internet, and they earn a commission. So for us, when we were approached by Job Tech Alliance, we believe that this is one of this is a channel that we'd love to sort of grow and expand and make more inclusive to the refugee population, simply because we believe in the opportunity. We know that having more diverse workers is a good thing generally in the ecosystem. And also, we know that we'll be able to provide a valuable service for access to to goods that could be productive and empowering for these different communities. And so we're really excited to be a part of this webinar, but also to be a part of the greater research that's taking place in this space, and to figure out what we can do to be more impactful in this field. Looking forward to further discussion.
Thanks, Shakib. That's really interesting. Great to see all the work that Jimmy is doing, and great to have one of the job tech platforms on the call. Now let's hear from the refugee side of things. Cedric Murhula, would you take a few minutes to introduce yourself and Yarid?
Yeah, thank you so much, and for being here, and excited to be part of this great panel when you talk about job tech. We are refugee-led organizations based in Uganda since 2007, and we've been working on a number of programs or services for actually both refugees and host communities. And some of those are protection in terms of emergency supports. We've been doing education, both informal education for English learners, because part of the integration of refugees in Uganda, which is an English-speaking country, should at least speak English. But also we have informal education for bridging for those young ones, 12 and below, that want to access formal schooling in Uganda, to be able to get them into a bridging program without interfere. But also we have the livelihood programs, in which we offer a lot of skillings, not limited to tailoring, crafts, hairdressing, craft making, briquette making, and so on. And as well as the one I think that made us to be here today is we call it workforce, refugee workforce partnerships, which is part of our job training and placements, where we're trying to train refugees and place them to different jobs and internships, because we believe that with growing number of refugees in Uganda today, lack of employment is massive. And there has never been a refugee-led organization actually that has made an effort to push to get refugee jobs, rather than training them for many years, in which we've been also doing as well. So since last year, we've engaged in this journey of training, but also placing refugees into different jobs. So we've been doing more of the normal job placements in different supermarkets, offices, manufacturing. And since July last year, we've been able to place at least 26 people for employment, and around 8 for internships, which was just like a short period of time. Now with this job tech, we are hoping we can scale that up. I'm happy to be here and discuss more on how we can make that happen. Thank you so much.
That's great, Cedric. And I don't know if you know, but actually at ULearn, we have an intern that is placed by Yarid.
Oh,
and
yes.
We're very happy with the program. So it's great to have you on the call. Right, then without further ado, let's start with a couple of the questions. Shakib, you already talked a little bit about how you see refugees as potential agents for the JForce, but do you have experience working with refugees at Jumia, and how was the experience?
So we've not specifically gone out, like I think like part of the feedback that Michelle put forward, we've not had like a specific sort of campaign to include refugees, but we know that our platform is sort of it's inclusive in a way that it does not alienate people like from different backgrounds. I think the only limitation that we have is sort of identification and accreditation. If you're able to have an ID that is at the same level as a national ID, then you're able to work. Because one of the things that as a sales agent, as a sales consultant, it's important for us to know, when we're gaining your trust, it's important for us to know where you're coming from and what you do. But that's on the supply side, in terms on the supply side of the sales agent. But on the demand side, actually, Jumia has been quite one of the exciting things that I learned from my expansion trips is Jumia has been part and parcel of refugee camps. When we started the expansion project, we set up a pickup station in Nachivale refugee settlement, and we have a lot of agents from Barara that go all the way to Nachivale, and we get quite a lot of orders in these spaces. Then we've also personally have had some just experience working with refugees on different projects that are outside of Jumia, sorry. And I know about like how that the robustness and the diversity and the opportunity that exists in this space. And I'm really excited to bring it to the forefront and make use of these different opportunities. So we've not done it formally, but I think after being contacted by BFA and Job Tech Alliance, we're really excited to see what's out there.
Great, thank you. So Cedric, you've been talking a lot about skilling. It's something that is really at the core of what you do at Yarid, skilling for livelihoods. So from the research, we see that digital skills are critical in being a success, for job tech platforms to be a success. How do you see refugee-led organizations positioning themselves to increasing those particular skills?
Yeah, this is really very important because among other research that Michelle has presented, even some research on employment shows how digital work opportunity can create more pathways to economic security, can increase refugee participation into labor force, and provide a way to bridge the gap between the host community and refugees as well. And I really have seen so many refugees interested into learning digital skills to increase their access to technology and opportunity like this one. And I'm happy to say that we are among the fewer organizations in Uganda that have at least a ICT or tech hub where we have computers and internet, but it's always been about learning the basics and some of the digital skills that are not necessarily into a job-related market. And this is the shift we are having. So to your question, I do believe that by supporting refugee-led initiatives in tech-related projects or tech-related initiatives that are income generating, will strongly positioning a lot of refugee-led initiatives into increasing skills needed to access jobs. But we are also supporting them into support their family at large. And the company like Jumia's Supuka is here. Now you can see access to jobs will be more easier. And I think the key answer here is to supporting more of this refugee initiative. First of all, to have like the one we have, or increasing on talent and skills so that they can meet the demand of the supplier.
That's great, thank you. Now from the company side, Shakib, training is a key aspect in this upskilling and making this happen. Is Jumia doing anything on this? What can platforms do?
So the good thing with an opportunity like ours for JFOS, it's quite, anyone can do it, right? So in terms of barriers to entry, it's quite limited. It's very easy to teach someone how to sell. but it's very hard to teach someone how to sell very well. So we have that sort of dynamic that we are trying to balance. All of our onboarding can be done virtually. It's very. We also have people operating in pods, so in teams. So we have like a sales team leader and other like new recruits. So there's a lot of learning on the job and education via peer-to-peer mentoring. So we try and make our training materials more accessible in terms of someone can get them on WhatsApp, you can get them on email, you can also get a phone call and we'll take you through the basics of training. And I think the most important thing is being able to receive on-the-job training, because something like sales can only make sense if it's practical, if you are able to go out in the field, because there's not enough role plays that can prepare you to actually go out and make a sale. So in terms of training, we have the non-formal ways of training, but we also have formal spaces for training. We have on a weekly basis, we have training sessions that are planned for people to go through the different aspects of the business, including how to sell, how to use the app, how to identify deals, how to identify a customer. And Jumia as a company has a lot of, for lack of a better word, internal working lingo that needs to be updated. Someone needs to be able to know, we have these campaigns, we have these flash sales. How do you take advantage of this? How do you make more money? So it's quite interactive, and it's not just top down. We don't just have people coming from the top to let people know how we work, but by encouraging people to work in groups and work in silos, we're able to encourage more information exchange and more exchange of experiences and to get people to that level. I think maybe where we need to improve is providing this training in different languages that are more accessible to people in these refugee settlements. So we're working on figuring out what that looks like. The good thing is we have Jumia in French-speaking countries, so we're able to have training in training packs in French. We have Jumia in Arabic-speaking countries. We're able to have that as well. So we are making efforts, and it's, I think, part of what we are hoping to do with Job Tech Alliance is to create training platform that is more palatable and more inclusive and more impactful to allow, because it's not just about creating opportunities, but also the opportunities that we already have created. How can we make them more sustainable? How can we make them more impactful? And how can we make them benefit the people that are sort of already using them, so that those people can actually help promote the initiatives themselves?
There's a lot of interesting experiences and good practices and lessons from the experience of Jumia. So it's really interesting to hear. But something that I think is really important is around skilling and training that's fit for market, right? Fit for needs of companies like Jumia. And so this is always an issue with all of the skilling that's happening in the refugee response. How much of that skilling is fit for companies that seek to expand in the settlements or in the capital? So maybe a question for Cedric: how are refugee-led organizations able to identify the needs of the market and the needs of employers? How can you support refugees to position themselves to be ready for the market?
Yeah, I think what we've been doing was the traditional ways of job search, mostly in Kampala. That's where we've been working a lot. And we've been really reaching out, calling decks, meetup, one-on-one meeting with employers to establish, first of all, that relationship. Because, in order to work with a company, and I think Shakib can testify on this as an employer, you need to establish that relationship. Who are you? Why? To be able to accept you into that. That's what we've been doing. But as far as this is concerned, honestly, I would say the technology platforms is new for us in terms of what we've been doing. And we are hoping with this job tech platform, we'll be able to do more. And one of them will be just, first of all, identifying these potential companies, these potential platforms, and how we can have some sales agent on them. by speaking to them, but also, you know, for them to provide us what are some of those eligibility opportunities that they have, what are some of the requirements, for instance, Jumia, to be a part of their sales agent. Is there language barriers? And I'm happy Shakib has just mentioned about Arabic, French. Those are some of the people we work with every day. Language that speaks to the people day to day so that they can better navigate the platform. But also the platform can also help us identify sales trainings. You know, Shakib mentioned, like Jumia, they have trainings that they need to have. Maybe the customer services training we are working on, we are training at Yarid is not the same as we come to Jumia. Maybe it's the next level. Maybe we can partner and say, hey, this is some of the sales, or this is your agent will come to your site and train the people that I think are going to be in this program to be able to understand what is it that needs to happen. So I think that when we partner with these e-commerce platforms, the refugee accessing these platforms, as well as getting us, and we're so excited with this partnership with JobTech and Mercy Corps, and just to be able to dive into this. But one thing I want to add into this is that, you know, don't get me wrong, many refugees in Uganda, especially in Kampala, they know computer and they know English. So, because some of them don't have access to formal education, either secondary, university, or vocational, they spend so much time. I've seen even people coming to a hub 3 times just because after they graduate, they just want to come again, they just want to be there. And at least the basics of computer usage, it is there. As you can see the research, you know, at least 80+% of refugees have access to telephone or smartphone, which is also very important. They can be able also to navigate it. Even those who do not have a smartphone, they know how to use it. So I think this is one of the ways we're going to make this this possible.
Very true, Cedric. Thanks for the reminder. So I can see the time's flying when we're having fun. So maybe let's have one final question for everyone to wrap up, as we can hand over back to the organizing team. So for both Cedric and Shakib, so what support would you need to create pathways for refugees to build their livelihoods using job tech platforms? Maybe we can hear from Shakib first and then from Cedric.
Right, thank you so much. I think it's a great question. I think firstly, just as answering that question, one of the things that maybe we lack in the private sector is just the awareness, the mindset change around what we think of who a refugee is, what they're able to do. There's a lot of bias about their capabilities, about their backgrounds, so I think what needs to be done on one side is to help us change this mindset about what does a refugee look like, who is a refugee, if you know, knowing from my experience, a lot of them are very highly qualified, highly capable, highly intelligent people that just have you know, terrible circumstances that they need to overcome in a way, one way or the other. So I think one of the things that can be done to help corporate companies and and non-corporate companies do this better is if we're able to change the mindset of how we see refugees within our society and their role. Then being able to highlight the different opportunities for me as someone that's coming from in a space that is looking for sales. I'm always looking for opportunity to enter new communities. So if we're able to help us figure out what are the best ways for us to enter these communities, what are the special needs, for lack of a better word, that would be required for us to set up something that makes sense, that works. Also, it's really expensive, I think, trying to you know, training, engaging, and you know, retaining of these people in these places is quite expensive if you don't have the right sort of resources to be sustainable, because you're not going to get, out of 100 people you're going to train, you hope to engage at least 60% of those, and of those maybe 40% of them to be engaged. In order for you to achieve that number of 40%, there's a significant amount of resources that go into the continual establishment of routines, establishment of cultures, collecting of the feedback and making the feedback impactful as well. And then also, if you're able to highlight what other people are doing in these spaces. One of the things that we in the tech space are really good at is what we call copying proudly, copying with pride. So if someone else is doing something that makes sense and they share this, we're able to copy with pride. We're able to come up and say, okay, it worked in this guy's space. How about we also try and do something like that? So we at Jumia are really happy to be leaders in this space where we're able to go into spaces where not many people are, but we're happy for others to copy with pride. I hope these few things are able to provide a good answer to your question.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you also talked about, changing the mindset and the image people have of refugees. I think that's really important. And I was very interested to hear that Jumia already has a service in Naki Valley settlement, and that's really great. And next time I travel there, I'll make sure to check it out and see how it works. That's awesome. Cedric, so what support would you need as an RLO or a refugee-led organization to create pathways for refugees to build their livelihoods, particularly in the job tech space? I hope Cedric is still with us. Oh no.
I think he might have dropped off. The network. Yeah. Okay.
Well, at least we got Cedric for the majority of the time, and I think his comments were really good and spot on. Really interested to see how far we can go in this partnership between RLOs and platforms, and with a convener like Job Tech Alliance, Michelle. And as an ecosystem player, maybe I'll give the final word to you. How do you envision your role in this space?
I think Shakib has actually given one example of how we are helping in this whole space. But also as part of this program, it's just making sure that we amplify the great work that platforms are doing, especially if you think about Uganda, but also we will end up doing a lot of team field building and connections to everything. We, as Masiko and Job Tech Alliance, we actually have a partner who's starting tomorrow in Kampala, and her main work will be to start connecting and actually to make all these engagements to continue. So we don't want it to just end with this, here's a nice report, what are you going to go about it? It's like, no, here's what we've found out, and here are the options and things we will do. So one of the aim is like working with Jumia and helping them think through how do you actually get to work with refugees, but also with other platforms as well. So they'll probably see more of the Job Tech Alliance in the refugee space, to just kind of encouraging more people to continue doing that.
Excellent. We can't wait. I'm very interested to see how that's going to pan out. It's quite innovative and new, so very exciting, all of it. Great. Well, that was it from me. Thank you so much, everyone who's still on the call, and I'll hand over to Chris. I believe he's going to do.
Kenya will do closing. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. A closing word. Thank you so much for having me. It was great. Bye.
Thank you so much, Magic. And thank you so much to our speakers, Shakib and and Michelle. It was really an insightful conversation, and I know there are a couple of questions that are still coming up. I don't know if the speakers are fine with like dropping their emails in case anyone has like particular questions and want to send emails post the webinar. So that option should be there. Great. And just to write on what Michelle was saying, so the report we have a newsletter going out next week Tuesday, and the report would be in that newsletter. So you definitely want to check out the Job Tech Alliance website, jobtechalliance.com, and sign up to be part of our ecosystem community. By signing up, you get to read our newsletter, you get to keep up the trend with the job tech industry in Africa and globally. And also, if you're a job tech platform that signed up for this webinar, please also go on the website and sign up to the platform members. That's it for my end. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.